Hi, I'm Christy Carter, and thank you for listening to this podcast produced by the good folks here at Fleet Newscast. This podcast is designed for use within the Fleet educational curriculum and should be listened to or watched on Hollow in line with your education providers. This podcast can be automatically translated into all Fleet languages by accessing the system's menu. Your education provider can help with that. First, the big question. Why are we here? And I do not mean biologically. For that podcast or hollow production, please access the menu listings. The fleet exists because our home planet, the planet Earth, where our species evolved, was destroyed by a meteor over 120 years ago. That meteor was discovered just under 60 years from the point of impact. 60 years sounds like a long time, right? But in terms of what the people on Earth had to do, it was a very short period. First, the scientists on Earth looked to the stars in search of a new home. Various solar systems that were thought capable of having a planet that could sustain life had been discovered. They built probes and enormous telescopes and all manner of incredible instruments. For that podcast or hollow production, please access the menu listings. Unfortunately, all of those places they thought were able to sustain life were proven to be no good. I know, right? Talk about bad luck. It still meant that in order for our species to survive, we had to get off the planet Earth. Some intrepid souls set up colonies on Mars, another planet within the same solar system as Earth. For that podcast or hollow production, please access the menu listings. The other thing they did is they built our fleet. The fleet you are now in and are now a part of. That's right, kids. We are all part of a fleet of over 40 vessels, and you are very special because you are one of the very few survivors of our species. No, I get what you're saying. It doesn't feel like you're special, right? I mean, look about. There's people everywhere. In fact, this whole fleet has millions of people. But remember this, over 15 billion people did not survive the meteor impact. That makes us a fraction of what we once were. So yes, you are very special. Some of the vessels within our fleet are called worldships. For the podcast and hollow production on the individual vessels, please access the menu listings. Most of the worldships were financed and constructed by countries on Earth, or by groups of countries working together in alliances. Some of the other vessels were financed and constructed privately and contain much smaller numbers. Others are for science research. 7 ships within the fleet were financed and constructed by corporations who gave money and resources in exchange for passage and the right to continue trade. They were called the Virtue Fleet. Sadly, 3 of those vessels collided as the fleet set out, which resulted in the deaths of millions of people. For that podcast or hollow production, please access the menu listings. That leads me to the next question. How are we moving? And how are so many vessels, all of different sizes and shapes, all moving at the same speed? Well, because of the devastating loss of 3 world ships, the fleet decided that every vessel should be navigated by a central computer system located on the Ark. That system is what keeps us all together and moving as one, and only that computer can make us all move. And by the way, we're moving all the time. We're traveling at a speed that will boggle your mind. We're also constantly changing direction as our probes detect anything in our path that could hurt us. We just don't feel it, as every change is done gently, because who wants synth cola spilled down their clothes? Am I right? But hey, I hear you. We know where we came from. What we really want to know is, where are we going? I hear you, but sadly, right now, we do not have a planet to aim for. What we do have are probes that we send out to search for what we call trace particles or signals or anything in space that might tell us there is a planet out there. We find trace particles all the time, so we know eventually we will find somewhere. We just don't know when. Our most famous probe is the Shuttle Gagarin. She is the fastest, most advanced thing ever produced by our species, and I'm telling you kids now, if we ever do find a new home, it will be because of that plucky little probe. Now, I'm sure you will have a ton of questions, so you go right on ahead and ask your education providers anything else you want to know. You can also access our menu listings for further podcasts and Hollow productions. Before I go, let me say this. Don't worry. Our fleet is capable of producing everything we need to survive for a very long time. Just don't waste anything. Remember that waste is a crime. I'm Christy Carter, and you've been watching a Fleet Newscast production. You take care now, folks.